Story 1. We had one rule about the phone at night. I worked the front desk at a small city hotel for about 8 months, mostly night shifts. It wasn't a bad job. Quiet, predictable. The kind of place where nothing really happened, which was exactly why I liked it. The hotel itself was old, but not charming old, just outdated. 3 floors, long hallways, and a very simple room numbering system. Rooms on the first floor were in the 100s, second floor 200s, third floor 300s. Every floor followed the same layout, same spacing, same number of rooms. On my first night shift, another receptionist trained me. She showed me the basics, check-ins, the cash drawer, how to reset the key machine when it froze. Then, almost as an afterthought, she said something that stuck with me. If the phone rings after 3 in the morning, she said, and there's no caller ID, don't answer it. I laughed a little, thinking she was joking. She didn't laugh back. It's just an old internal line, she added. It causes issues. That was it. No explanation, just a rule. Most nights were uneventful. After midnight, the lobby went completely still. The only sounds were the vending machines humming and rain tapping softly against the windows. Around 2:30, I'd usually make coffee, even though I never drank it. It was just something to do. The phone almost never rang at night. Except sometimes it did. The first time it happened, I barely reacted. The phone rang 3 times. Not 4, not 5, 3. I looked up at the display. It didn't show an external number. It just said, room. No number after it. I remembered the rule, so I let it ring. After the 3rd ring, it stopped. Nothing else happened. Over the next few weeks, it happened again. Not every night, but always the same. 3:17 in the morning. 3 rings. Room. I never answered. I told myself it was exactly what my coworker had said. Some leftover internal line from before the phone system was upgraded. Still, it bothered me. Not because it was scary, because it felt unfinished. One night, instead of stepping away, I stayed at the desk and watched the phone while it rang. After the first ring, the display flickered. After the second, text appeared. A room number, 214. I frowned. That didn't make sense. Room 214 should have been on the 2nd floor, between room 212 and room 216. I checked the guest list. There was no room 214. I checked the printed floor plan under the desk. There was no room 214 there either. The phone rang the 3rd time, then stopped. I sat there for a moment, staring at the empty lobby. If the call was internal, and it was showing a specific room, then logically, it had to be coming from the 2nd floor, from the place where room 214 should have been. I took the master key and went upstairs. The 2nd floor hallway looked exactly the way it always had. Room 212, then 216. No gap, no extra space. I stood where room 214 should have been. The walls on either side were solid. The spacing was wrong for a missing door. Architecturally, the room couldn't exist. As I stood there, the phone rang again. I could hear it faintly, echoing up through the stairwell. 3 rings. I didn't wait for it to stop. I went back downstairs. The next morning, when the day staff arrived, I mentioned it casually. One of the older receptionists froze. "You saw a number?" she asked. I nodded. 214. "Yes." She closed her eyes for a moment. "You actually went up," she said quietly. That was the first time anyone explained anything. Years before I worked there, room 214 had existed. It was mostly used for long-term stays. One guest, in particular, had lived there for months. He paid in cash, worked nights, rarely left during the day. He called the front desk often, always late, always for small things. He said the room felt wrong, that the walls sounded hollow at night, that he never felt completely alone in it. One night, he called and asked someone to come up. He said something was wrong with the room. Someone answered. No one went. When staff unlocked the door later that morning, he was dead inside. Not violently. He had been there for hours. The phone was off the hook. After that, the room was closed immediately. Not marked out of service. Closed. During the next renovation, the room number was removed. The space was absorbed into storage. The hallway was remeasured. Officially, room 214 never existed again, but the phone line was never disconnected. The older receptionist looked at me and said, "That phone doesn't ring because someone is calling. It rings because something still thinks the room is there." After that, I followed the rule. I never answered. The phone still rang sometimes, always at 3:17, always 3 times. On my last week working there, it rang again. I was standing behind the desk when the phone started ringing. 3 times. I didn't move. I didn't look at it. When the ringing stopped, the lobby felt different. Too quiet, like something was waiting to see what I would do. A few seconds passed, then the elevator chimed. The doors slid open. No one was inside. I stayed where I was, staring at the empty elevator car. That was when the feeling hit me. The sense that I was being watched, not aggressively, not threateningly, just checked. As if something needed to know whether the front desk was still occupied. I didn't speak. I didn't step forward. After a moment, the elevator doors closed. The display above it changed. 2. The elevator started moving upward. I stood completely still as it disappeared from view. The phone didn't ring again. I finished my shift. I never worked nights after that. Even now, I think about room 214, about how something can be removed from a building, but still remember where it belongs, and how some things don't call to be answered. They call to see if anyone is there. Story 2. Someone was standing outside my hotel room. I didn't think much of it at first. Honestly, nothing dramatic happened in the moment. It was only later that I realised what I had probably been dealing with. This happened a few years ago when I was travelling alone for work. My company booked me into a small, inexpensive hotel near the highway. Not run down, just plain. The kind of place you don't really remember afterward. It had been raining most of the evening when I arrived, not storming, just steady rain that made everything feel quieter than usual. I checked in around 9. The lobby was empty except for the receptionist. He gave me my key card, told me the breakfast hours, and mentioned that the hotel was fairly full that night because of a conference in town. My room was on the 4th floor. Everything felt normal. Beige carpet, identical doors, a quiet hallway. I went to my room, ate, watched some TV, and went to sleep. I woke up sometime after 2 in the morning with a strong feeling that someone was outside my door. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then I heard movement, not walking, just the sound of someone shifting slightly, like they'd been standing still for a while. I checked the time on my phone. 2:07 a.m. I stayed very still and listened. Outside the rain was still falling. I could hear it faintly through the window, and underneath that, something else, breathing, very quiet, but steady. I didn't open the door. I didn't say anything. At one point I shifted slightly in the bed. The mattress creaked under my weight. I froze again. A few seconds later the breathing stopped. I assumed it was another guest who had the wrong room and realised their mistake. I fell back asleep. The next day passed without anything unusual. I left early for work and came back late that evening. The rain had started again by the time I returned. When I got off the elevator on my floor, I noticed one of the rooms down the hall had its door slightly open, just a crack, enough to see darkness inside. I remember thinking it was strange because the hotel had seemed very strict about security, but I assumed housekeeping had been interrupted or something. I went to my room and locked the door. That night I woke up again around the same time. Same feeling. This time I was sure someone was there. The breathing was closer than before, right outside my door. At some point I reached out and accidentally bumped the nightstand. It made a dull sound against the wall. I held my breath. A moment later the breathing stopped. Not long after that I heard a soft sound down the hallway, like a door being gently pushed shut. The next morning all the doors were closed. When I checked out I mentioned it to the receptionist. I didn't say I was scared, just that I thought someone had been lingering in the hallway at night. He paused longer than I expected. Then he asked, "What room were you in?" I told him. He nodded slowly. "Did you notice any doors open nearby?" he asked. I said yes. One room, a few doors down. He didn't explain anything, just said, "Okay," and made a note on a piece of paper. I didn't think much of it again until a few weeks later. One evening, I was scrolling through my phone and saw a local news article shared by someone I followed. The headline mentioned a hotel near the highway, the same one I had stayed at. The article didn't give many details, just that a man had been arrested after being found inside several hotel rooms over the course of a few nights. He wasn't a guest. According to the article, he had been using rooms that were temporarily empty, moving between floors late at night. What caught my attention was one specific line. It said he would stand outside occupied rooms and listen. If he heard movement, he would leave. If he didn't, he would try the door. I closed the article and sat there for a long time, thinking about the night I lay awake, listening to someone breathe outside my door, and how the sound stopped the moment I moved. The hotel never contacted me again, but I still think about one thing. He wasn't just standing there. He was waiting to find out if I was awake before he tried the door. Story 3, I drove into a town that shouldn't exist. I was driving home late one night and missed my exit. It wasn't dramatic. I wasn't falling asleep at the wheel. Just distracted in that quiet, unfocused way you get after a long day. I remember thinking it wasn't a problem. I'd take the next exit, turn around and be home a little later than planned. But the next exit never came. The highway narrowed. The reflective signs stopped appearing. The streetlights grew farther apart until they disappeared entirely. Then my phone lost signal, not gradually, all at once. I glanced at it, frowned, and set it face down on the passenger seat. I kept driving. The road curved into something smaller. 2 lanes became one. The asphalt changed texture, rougher and darker. There were no signs telling me where I was. I thought about turning around, but there was nowhere obvious to do it. The road dipped and bent in a way that made it feel easier to keep going forward. After about 20 minutes, I saw lights ahead. A town. It didn't look abandoned. It just looked old. The buildings were intact, the windows unbroken, the streets clean. But everything felt paused. The gas station had analog pumps. The storefronts had painted signs instead of plastic ones. The lettering on the windows looked hand-painted, uneven in a way I hadn't seen in years. There were a few people outside. They moved slowly, no phones in their hands, no hurry in their steps. I drove through the centre of town and felt an odd pressure in my chest like I'd stayed awake too long. The hotel sat at the edge of town. 3 stories, plain brick exterior. A vertical neon sign glowed softly. Hotel. No brand name. No vacancy sign. Just the word. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for one car. It was parked crookedly, half outside the lines like it had been stopped in a rush. It looked wrong there. Not because it was damaged, because it was too new. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of soap and dust. Not dirty, just unused. The carpet was thick and patterned, the furniture heavy and dark. Behind the front desk stood a woman in a neat uniform, writing in a large ledger. She didn't look up when I approached. "I'd like a room for the night," I said. She nodded, as if that had already been decided. When I asked about Wi-Fi, she paused. "Radio's in the room," she said. I paid in cash without thinking about it. She didn't offer a receipt. She handed me a metal key attached to a wooden tag. Second floor. As I turned toward the stairs, someone stepped into my path. "You're not from here." The voice was too close. A man stood just inside the doorway, blocking it slightly. I hadn't heard him come in. Up close he looked worse. His clothes were modern, but worn thin and stained. His hands shook slightly. His eyes kept darting past me toward the road outside. "You drove in tonight," he said. "It hasn't taken you yet." I laughed nervously. "I'm just staying the night," I said. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but firm. "What year is your car?" he asked. The question felt invasive. I told him. His grip tightened. "I bought mine the same year," he said quickly. "Brand new. Drove it straight off the lot." Behind the desk, the woman cleared her throat. The man let go of me immediately. But his eyes stayed locked on mine. Upstairs, my room was clean and neatly made. The furniture was old but solid. On the nightstand sat a rotary phone and a small radio. The television worked, but only a handful of channels came in. All of them showed unfamiliar programs. At some point I realised how quiet it was. No traffic, no distant highway noise, just the hum in the walls. Sometime during the night I woke to a voice in the hallway, low, urgent. I opened my door a crack. The man was standing there, too close. "You have to leave in the morning," he whispered. "Don't stop. Don't turn around." His breathing was fast. "I tried to help someone once," he said. "They don't let you leave if you try to take anything with you." "What are you talking about?" I asked. His eyes filled with something close to panic. "Ignore that. Just take me with you," he said. "I'll sit in the back. I won't touch anything." When I didn't answer, his voice rose. "Please," he said. "I don't belong here." He tried to grab at me. That was when fear finally took over. I shut the door and locked it. In the morning, the light through the curtains looked wrong. Muted. Flat. Downstairs, the woman took my key without a word. Outside, the man was waiting by his car. He stepped into the road when he saw me. "Don't leave me," he screamed. I shook my head, got into my car and drove. He was shouting frantically as I pulled away. I didn't look back. The road out of town felt shorter. Too short. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with missed calls. The signal was back. I checked the time. Same day, same hour. The next day, I searched through regional newspaper archives. I knew what I was looking for. I just didn't know if I wanted to find it. The article was from decades ago. It described a man who disappeared while driving home late at night. The location matched the road I had taken. The date matched the year he said he bought his car. The article listed the make and model of the vehicle, the same one I'd seen parked outside the hotel. There wasn't much else. No theories, no follow-up. Just a short note saying the search was eventually called off. That was when I understood who he was. I think about how afraid I was of him, about how quickly I decided something was wrong with him instead of the place. He had been missing for decades and I had been his only chance out. But then I realised what he had said before dismissing himself. They don't let you leave if you try to take anything with you. Story 4, they called to ask if I was alone. I had just finished a 5-day work event abroad. It was one of those stretches where you barely sleep at all. 10 hours total over 5 days, maybe less. By the time I reached the motel, I was beyond exhausted. The place wasn't great. The carpet felt slightly damp under my shoes. The blankets were cold and heavy, like they'd never fully dried. Normally that would have bothered me. That night I didn't care. I locked the door, dropped my bag and fell asleep almost immediately. It was around 8 in the evening. I woke up to the phone ringing. The motel phone. It took me a second to even understand where I was. A man's voice said there had been a noise complaint from my room. I was confused. I told him that couldn't be right. I'd been asleep the entire time. He paused, then asked if I was sure. I said yes. He asked if there was anyone else in the room with me. I told him no. I was alone. Another pause. Then he asked again. Was I absolutely sure I was by myself? Was there anyone else who could be making noise? Something about that question felt strange, even through the fog of exhaustion. I told him again that I was alone. The call ended. I fell back asleep almost instantly. The next morning the whole thing started to bother me. There hadn't been any noise, no TV sounds, no voices through the walls, no doors slamming. The motel had been quiet, and the way he kept asking if I was alone felt wrong. Later that day, I mentioned it casually to the front desk. They looked confused. They checked their system. No one had called my room. No noise complaints had been logged. They told me no one on staff had spoken to me that night. That was when the explanation I'd been avoiding finally settled in. Someone had called my room, but it hadn't been the motel. They weren't checking on noise. They were checking on people. How many were in the room, whether anyone would notice if the door opened, whether I was alone. I thought about how tired I'd been, how easily I'd answered, how I'd given away information without thinking, and how the only reason nothing happened was because I always used the chain lock, every time, without exception. I didn't sleep much after that, but I was wide awake the rest of my stay. Story 5. My mum knew we shouldn't stay there. I was very young when this happened, too young to remember it clearly, but it's a story my mum has told so many times that it feels like a memory. We were on a long road trip as a family. 3 small kids, one exhausted car ride through winding roads and unfamiliar terrain. By the time we reached the place we were supposed to stay, it was already dark. The building looked normal enough, a roadside lodge just off the highway. But the moment we pulled into the parking lot, my mum froze. She didn't say anything at first. She just stayed seated, gripping the steering wheel. Then she told my dad she didn't want to stay there. She couldn't explain why. She just said something felt wrong. My dad was tired. We were all tired. We had a reservation and it was late. He convinced her to stay just for the night. She agreed, but she never relaxed. When we got out of the car, my mum wouldn't let go of our hands. Not once. She kept us close while my dad checked in, scanning the lot, the doors, the windows. She later said she felt like she needed to keep track of every movement, like something was watching us. To try and calm her down, my dad suggested we go to the pool. It was quiet, empty. For a moment it seemed like maybe she'd been wrong. Then she noticed there were no towels. She called the front desk. A man arrived a few minutes later carrying towels. The second he stepped into the pool area, my mum's entire demeanour changed. She didn't hesitate. She pulled us out of the water so fast we didn't even understand what was happening. She wrapped us in towels and rushed us back to the room. Later she said it wasn't something he did. It was something she felt. When he looked at us, she felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of danger. Not fear, something deeper. That night, my parents pushed furniture in front of the door. They made us all sleep in the same bed. My mum barely slept. The next morning, we checked out early and drove somewhere else. She couldn't stop talking about how wrong that place had felt. My dad tried to reassure her. Nothing had happened. We were fine. A few months later, my parents were watching the news late at night. There was a report about a violent crime that had taken place in the same region we'd travelled through. A man was being questioned. As details came out, my mum felt that same cold certainty in her chest. She recognised his face immediately. He was the man from the pool. My mum has always said the same thing since then. Fear doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, Sometimes it's just a refusal to relax, and when every part of you is telling you that something is wrong, you listen. Because sometimes that feeling is the only warning you're ever going to get.